Check. 1, 2, 3.
The D.
Brief.
This is the D brief.
Your guide to Detroit.
Your guide to Detroit's
arts and entertainment scene.
This is the D.
Brief.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm your co-host. My name is Seth Ressler.
And I'm Becky Scarsallo.
And I got to tell you, since we've started this podcast, I have learned a lot about Detroit history.
I've been telling you.
I mean, you have.
There's a lot to learn, and you're doing a great job. You're a good student.
Very helpful. But every now and then, it's good to bring an expert in.
Absolutely.
Somebody who, dare I say, knows even more.
It is possible, yes.
We've got one today. She is the Chief Development and Communications Officer for the Detroit Historical Society. I want to welcome to the podcast Rebecca Salminen Witt.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Yeah,
Thank you for
welcome.
being here. So I do want to ask about this because I've noticed in doing the research for this show, like when I first got to town, I saw the Detroit Historical Museum. But there is also the Detroit Historical Society. What is the difference? What is the relationship?
The magical question. So the Detroit Historical Society is an umbrella group. The society actually began the Detroit Historical Museum. Later on, the Dossin Great Lakes Museum was added to the portfolio. Now the Detroit Historical Society manages and raises all the funds for and maintains both of those museums I just mentioned, as well as the Collections Resource Center, where the big, huge collection is stored.
Meaning all the stuff that can't fit in the two museums now.
Exactly right.
And you rotate out.
Yeah. So at any given time, we only have about 5% of the collection on display. We have actually between 250,000 and 300,000 items in the collection.
Wow.
It's astounding. Yeah.
And even with a couple of 100,000 square feet of museum space, it only fits about 5%.
Sure.
Yeah.
And when was the Historical Society founded? How long has this collecting been going on?
Since 1921. So we are fast approaching our 100th anniversary. We're super excited about it.
You guys are history yourselves.
Right.
We're getting there.
So,
Exactly.
wow. So how does that work? What happens? Like, for example, there were the exhibitions around 1967.
Right, yeah.
So how does that work in terms of the museum and in terms of the greater collection?
Sure. So, and actually 67 is a great example because it really kind of changed the way we do our work as a historical organization. The way folks normally do it when you're a historical museum is you think of a story that needs to be told. You go search through your collection, find some cool stuff. You do the historical research, you wrap it all up in the bow, and then you invite people to come and see it. Detroit 67 was done in a different way, and it has forever changed the way we will do our work in that we went out to the public and asked them about the stories. What do you remember of that time? What have you heard? What is important to you? And from those stories, we then formed the story that needed to be told for Detroiters. And so we collected over 500 oral histories. These are people's personal memories, the memories of their families, the things that they knew that happened at the time. From there, we could glean what was so important for Detroiters about that story. From there, we did the historical research. We then dug into the collection. We found the things that we have that supported the stories. We went out and got more things that support the stories. And only at that point did we build the exhibition and the programming that supports it. So that's kind of the way we do our work now. And it's different as a historical organization because, a lot of the history we tell is, hundreds of years old. And so you can't really go ask, someone who was here in the 1600s. They're not around anymore. But what you can do is talk to the community about those stories that are important to them and make sure that you're serving the whole community in the stories you tell on the walls and in the halls of the museums. And that's what we do.
Well, I think that's really important in a way that you're evolving. And I think a lot of times people can think of history and specifically historical museums as kind of old, crusty, dusty stuff. And, with like signs on the wall that you got to read. And, it's not engaging.
Right.
And, we're in this time where everything is a competition for audience, for one thing. So it just makes good business sense. But just on a greater sense, like our history belongs to all of us. It shouldn't just be things on the wall. Mm-hmm. So I just love this way that you're growing and evolving and really connecting with people. And I can't wait to see how that keeps, building on that.
Yeah. It's interesting because history is the foundation for all of the current events that are happening now. And so you're right. One of the challenges we have as a historical organization is to keep people from thinking that a historical museum is just a place you go see dusty old stuff, right? And so when you think about every single current event, every single social issue that we are discussing that matters so much to us right now, those contemporary things that are occupying all of our time and energy have their antecedent in something historical. And it's those stories and those items from the collection that can help us understand that. That helps us understand where we find ourselves today and hopefully teaches us some lessons so that we can make a future that we're proud of.
Right.
What is the saying? Those who don't learn history are destined to repeat it.
Exactly
Correct.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
It does feel like that a little bit.
It really does. Surreal. Yeah.
I will tell you, when we were researching Detroit 67, and I was one of the people who edited all of the words that you see on the wall in that exhibit, it was actually, I mean, there were times where it was chilling. You were reading things that happened 50 years ago that literally could have been spoken yesterday.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And you started to branch out community-wise too. Tell us about this whole collaboration with Detroit Foundation Hotel. And that's a different way of looking at it.
It is, and it's it kind of goes to that thing that I mentioned where, we only got room for 5% of our collection at any given time. But those are interesting stories that Detroiters care about, that people from throughout the region care about. And so we are actively looking for partners that can help us expand by giving us a new and additional space to show some of that collection. So the Foundation Hotel had a great room on their 4th floor that they weren't doing anything with. That hotel is in a historic firehouse, and we have a huge collection of fire stuff, so things from the various earliest days of Detroit's fire department. And so we were able to pull some of that stuff out, give it a new temporary home in the Foundation Hotel, and let a whole bunch of new people see stuff that was just hidden away otherwise.
So I have a coffee table that has nothing on it at home. If you need some space, you're more than welcome.
What would be the theme?
Whatever I can charge admission for.
Oh, no. Free and open to the public is a key tenet of this type of
Maybe
exhibit.
some super cool radio microphone.
Oh, there you
I
go.
would
Radio
love that.
history.
Yeah, I could find a home for that. Yes, we should talk.
More so, though, it's like geek culture. So anything like super geeky, put in Seth's house.
There we go.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Dawson Great Lakes Museum and what's going on there, because I know that there's a lot of renovations happening.
Yeah.
There is. So the Dossin Great Lakes Museum in a beautiful spot right on the shore of the Detroit River. Museum built in 1961. Really great kind of little jewel box of a museum there. It's a little bit of a hidden treasure. For the last, 50, 60 years or so, almost 60 years, that space had been used, the inside of that space had been used. It's a great riverfront site, but we had never used the site itself. And so a few years ago, the folks at the Historical Society decided they would try to raise some funds to do a site plan and renovate the actual site so that we could have some outdoor exhibition space. We had a few artifacts outside. One specific, very special one, we have the bow anchor from the Edmund Fitzgerald that's there.
It's amazing.
And that had been used for a long time. But frankly, it was kind of, in the most prominent place we had in those grounds, but it wasn't awfully very special. So this, we're doing it'll eventually be almost a $5 million renovation of those grounds. The first phase is happening right now. There are guys out there, well, it's dark now, so they're probably not out there exactly right now, but there are guys out there with heavy equipment, pouring cement, building a new cove and waterfront space for that space, making it so that our visitors are going to be able to come and use that waterfront site. It's going to have a really beautiful Lost Mariners Memorial. There's a river walk that's modeled after the famous river walk downtown in Detroit. There's a new patio space that's going to be there. And there's a large lawn that was actually reclaimed from just kind of overgrown brush sort of space where we're going to be able to do tented events and things there too. So it really will become a public space for the very first time in 60 years.
That's amazing. And it fits so well with all the renovations that have gone on the island in general, the need for spaces for people to gather and be together, and also special event spaces that are special like that. I mean, location.
No kidding. I mean, when you see that patio space, which is right outside our large meeting room in the museum, looks straight across to the big fountain on the Canada side.
It's gorgeous.
Hiram Walker is over there. I mean, it's some really beautiful river frontage.
And for somebody who hasn't been inside the museum, what's going on inside?
Well, like I said, it's a little jewel box. When you walk into the museum, the first room you come to is called the Gothic Room, and it takes your breath away.
Yeah,
it has,
absolutely.
It's the inside of a side wheel paddle boat. From the turn of the century kind of time frame. It was the men's smoking lounge, and it's this beautiful millwork, turned wood. There are carved frogs in it. It's an amazing piece of work. There's a big stained glass window, a fireplace. All of this was taken from this boat when the boat was scuttled. It lived in a barn for about 10 years until the museum was built. And then the folks who built the museum, someone knew about that, and they raised funds. They went down to someone's barn in Ohio, purchased it, brought it back, and installed it in the museum. That's the very first thing that you walk into when you go in there.
It is jaw-dropping.
It's amazing.
Really is,
It's amazing. So from there, you go in and you see one of the largest collections in the country of scale ship models. There's a really great hands-on space for kids where they can learn how boats are put together, how ballast works so they don't tip over, all of that kind of stuff. There's some really neat interactives that talk about hydroplane racing on the Detroit River. The hydroplane races were, continue to be a big thing for us, and they were a big thing for the founders of the museum. The Dossin Great Lakes Museum was the original donation that allowed it to be built was by the Dawson brothers. The Dawson brothers were hydroplane racers.
How long have hydroplane races been going on there?
Oh, geez. Probably at least 80 years.
Wow.
Possibly longer than that.
I had no idea.
Hydroplanes, so a little interesting fact, hydroplanes became really big after World War II because they had all of these leftover jet engines. And they turned those leftover jet engines into boats and raced them on the river. And so that's one of the reasons Detroit River has such an interesting hydroplane racing history.
Huh.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
So I'm sure this takes a lot of money to do this renovation.
Indeed.
And it's going to take a long time. What's the projected finish date?
Well, we really hope, now that we've broken ground and we've got rolling, we've raised about $2.2 million toward the 4.4 so far. We're about halfway there. We would really like to be able to raise the rest of those funds so that we can just keep rolling right through the whole project and hopefully be done for our 100th anniversary in 2021.
2021. Okay, so there's something we can all do to help with this, right? You got an event coming up.
We've got an event coming up.
Tell us about this Bourbon and Bowties.
Yeah, Bourbon and Bowties, super fun event. Another interesting thing about the Dossin Great Lakes Museum, it's on the point of Belle Isle that is kind of one of the closest distances across the Detroit River from Canada. It was a jumping off point for rum runners during Prohibition. Right across the river is the Canadian Club whiskey factory. The Purple Gang ran liquor across there for Al Capone back in the day.
Were they using hydroplanes?
No,
Mostly
they were
in the
using
winter.
Women with their whiskey girdles.
That's right.
Seriously, because they had to wear these big old skirts. And
Whiskey girdles?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. I don't have one of
it's
these.
nobody's going to be looking up a woman's skirt. So in the guise of her undergarments, she's got little,
I know
flaps.
what I'm getting my girlfriend for Christmas.
Yeah. Yeah.
Indeed. So with that history, and remember we're history folks, we thought it would be a really interesting idea to create an event that sort of celebrated that history. Also remember that fabulous room I talked about, the Gothic Room when you walked in was the men's smoking room. Ilana, our CEO, and I were standing around there one day, and someone said, "Gosh, I wonder how much bourbon and cigars had been smoked in this room," right? And so, kind of created an event around there. The first one was last spring. We brought it; it was so popular, we brought it back again for this fall. 3 really good tasting stations. We're going to have 11 bourbons and 5 whiskeys. So far, it seems like every day when I look, something new has gotten added. They're all curated to different themes around that prohibition. And this year, we're activating another very little known part of Detroit's history. Detroit was once the second biggest cigar manufacturing place in the country outside of Florida. And so we're going to have one station that's cigar rolling curated to bourbon. So you can roll a cigar and it'll be curated to a specific bourbon that's there.
How do you match a cigar to bourbon? Like, who's the expert that knows how to do
Not
that?
me. I'll tell you what.
I would just believe whatever they said. Oh, yes, these are amazing
Right.
together.
Oh, yes, the toffee notes.
Right. Pairs perfectly with it. Yeah.
I think that's it. Well, that new patio I talked about, it's going to be done just in time for this November 8th event. So you're going to be able to go out on that patio,
exciting.
smoke your cigar, because of course we can't smoke in a historical museum, but
Right.
you can on the patio.
Do I have to wear a bow tie? I don't have one. Where do I get one?
Bow tie optional, but encouraged.
Okay.
Yeah, I would get one.
All right, I'll get one.
I would get one.
I've never worn a bow tie. I don't know how you tie a bow tie.
Well, maybe you can just get those that are already pre-tied.
They do have the
that
pre-tied
clip.
ones.
This is why they made YouTube,
Oh yeah, that was legit. Yeah, YouTube video. But yeah, so it's a dressy affair.
It is a cocktail attire. We'll have food there. Obviously, the bourbons, cigars, and
Music.
music. Yes, indeed. Last time we had a great student trio, and I think they're coming back again this year. So, always some good jazz there. And yeah, so it's you can go to DetroitHistorical.org to get your tickets. 3 ticket levels. Our members, we love our members. You get a little bit of break if you're a member.
Okay.
So that's fun. Members' price is $100. Rest of our guests are $125, and we have a special ticket price at $75 for young professionals. Just trying to
that's
get
smart,
a new audience introduced to the Historical Society.
And
So,
how do you define young?
we don't check your
Okay. All right.
If you feel young at heart,
There you
we're gonna
go.
let you in.
Yeah. No, I think that's very reasonable for a really nice night out with food and drinks, and knowing that you're supporting this fantastic new plan that everybody can enjoy. I mean, and the museum's free.
The museum is free, yeah. So it's and the renovations are going to make it easier to park, easier to get into. The island is great. We had over 200 visitors there this Sunday afternoon. So
Really?
people really do enjoy the museum, and it's for us. It's as much about supporting the great project as it is about getting more people in there to experience it and visit.
Exactly. Yeah. I love it too, the size of it, because sometimes museums are overwhelming and you think, oh, I got to have hours or something. But you can go there and really have a great experience, and then still like pop over to the aquarium or see the flowers. You can do other things on Belle Isle as part of your day.
Yeah, you know what? It doesn't eat up your whole day.
Yeah.
You can do a great job in that museum in an hour or so. Of course, there are there's one part that gets into the Edmund Fitzgerald wreck. There, we have some of the original recordings from the ship that went out to try to save them, and that's some deeper material. Takes a little bit longer to digest it, but it's a great place to just kind of pop into on a Sunday afternoon.
For all ages. My boys, I remember when they were even really small, they loved it. So,
Oh yeah. There's stuff they can get in. There are canoes they can paddle, and speedboats they can drive, and all that kind of stuff too.
Let's also talk about this other event that you've got coming up, which is this golf outing.
Yeah, so I think we're the bravest folks in town having a golf outing on October 21st.
That's awesome.
It's our first annual The Course of History Golf Classic. So we're inviting folks to come out to the Detroit Golf Club, a historical venue
Beautiful
of
place.
itself,
Yeah.
beautiful place, just been all redone for the recent pro tournament that was there in June. sponsored by Rocket. And it's our very first one. So, we're hoping that folks will come out. Every hole has curated historical facts, which is kind of cool. Different than you're going to find at your run-of-the-mill golf outing. So we're really leaning into the history of golf, that really historic sport.
Is there a quiz at the end?
Yeah, there are prizes at the end.
Oh, okay. So what kind of prizes?
Well, so the winners take home a Tiffany crystal trophy.
Wow.
So there's that. Mm-hmm. And actually, we've got 3 of those. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So it's going to be a great day for our golfers. And there are still foursomes available. Very few, only a couple, because it's kind of a hot ticket with that recently redone golf course. But
and how do people get involved if they'd like to participate?
DetroitHistorical.org. You can always call us at the Historical Museum, too. Just ask for someone in the development department. We'll be happy to help.
Okay. And if you're lucky, you get to talk to Rebecca herself.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, Rebecca, before you get out of here, we're going to play a little game. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go. We're going to ask you for a series of rapid-fire recommendations. Just tell us the first thing that comes to mind. Starting with this, you're into history. If you had a time machine, which moment in Detroit history would you go back to?
I would go back to, I think I'd go back to when Cadillac first arrived, because I'd love to be able to see what Detroit looked like at that time, the landscape, the people, and understand what that was like for those folks who were interacting.
And the Nain Rouge, do you believe in him? Is he?
I met him outside my office one day a few years back.
Oh, okay. So are there any dream Detroit history items that are probably living in someone's house or something like that you would just love to capture and have in the museum?
Oh, gosh. There are always those garage finds in terms of, the original prototype vehicles. Our vehicles are so popular. And we had so many amazing auto designers here that someone's got some of those prototypes in their garage that we haven't gotten our hands on yet, and we'd love to have those.
Okay.
If you could have lunch with any Detroiter, dead or alive, who would it be?
I would love to have had lunch with Aretha Franklin. She was one of those folks who was a star, but she was always a Detroiter. She was one of our Motown greats who never left and kept us in her heart and her minds for her whole life.
Well, you must have a lot of these. What's a weird Detroit trivia fact that not many people know?
Let me think about that for 1 second. I think the mile marker story is an interesting one. A lot of folks, we have 8 Mile. Everybody knows 8 Mile, or 8 Mile if you're from not Detroit.
You're right.
Wait. I missed the nuance. What's
So Detroiters say 8 Mile.
8 Mile.
And what do non-Detroiters say?
8 Mile.
You hear it?
Yeah, sort of. I guess I got to practice that. I've never paid attention now.
8 Mile.
I'm not from here.
Right? Yeah. Well.
8 Mile.
Yeah. Right.
8 Mile.
8 Mile.
8 Mile.
8 Mile.
Yeah. So the story about that is that if you drive south on Woodward, you get to what should be 1 mile before you get to the river, and people wonder why that is. The reason for that is because 1 mile was at basically the place where Campus Martius is now. So we started our mile marker from kind of the center of that wheel-shaped grid that the city was originally built around.
Point of origin, as they say.
Yeah.
If you could restore any Detroit building that's out there, do you have your eye on one that you'd like to make new again?
Man, I'm such a preservationist. I want to save them all. I know that is, not possible. I love the Ford factory in Highland Park, right on Woodward there.
Oh, yes.
That's one that's just waiting, and I know they're working on getting that saved. But there are a lot of really cool library buildings that should be saved. There are Albert Kahn buildings that are just sort of sitting out there that people don't even recognize anymore. That would be great to dig out and do something amazing with them.
Do you have a favorite local bookstore?
Source Booksellers.
I love that too. For people who don't know, what do you love about it?
It's so I love the proprietor.
Janet,
She's wonderful.
yeah.
Janet's wonderful. But also, it's an eclectic collection of primarily nonfiction stuff that's sort of meaningful to people from all walks of life. So you encounter all kinds of folks in there. It's always an adventure when you go there.
Very nicely done.
Very nicely done.
Yeah, superstar status.
All right, the big event, Bourbon and Bowties at the Dossin Great Lakes Museum on Belle Isle is happening November 8th. And people can go again to the website for all the details.
They can, DetroitHistorical.org.
And also there they can get the details about this golf outing. So,
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for coming on the show. It was great to have you.
My pleasure.
Yes,
Thank you
wealth
for having
of
me.
knowledge. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And good luck with the rebuild. I can't wait to see what it all looks like when it's done.
You know
Oh, my
what?
gosh.
Come see it this holiday season. It should be sparkling and new.
Yeah, well, we'll be at the event.
Until then, Detroit's moving.
Keep up.
The D Brief.
Your guide to Detroit's arts and entertainment scene.